We are so happy to have artist Sue Macartney with us today to help us with our drawings. Sue Macartney has a professional background in graphic design and art education and is the author-illustrator of the picture book Benjamin's Blue Feet by Pajama Press. She was born in British Columbia in Canada and spent formative years living in Africa and the Caribbean. Exploring nature, writing, and drawing are some of her favorite pastimes. Sue recently worked as a nature sketch artist educator for the Bateman Foundation and lives in Victoria, British Columbia, with her husband and a backyard full of birds. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. And I'm really excited to be here this morning. I'm coming to you from Victoria on Vancouver Island, the traditional territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And normally, or this is the past week, it's been so beautiful. It's a little overcast today, but it's camas season. And I don't know if you know about the camas, but we've
Really?
got
Mm.
fields of camas. All over the island right now, especially in our Garry Oak meadows. So it's really pretty. We're enjoying those a lot. So again, excited to be here, and I have a little slide presentation, and I'm going to walk through how we're going to um, do our drawing this morning. So I'm just going to share my slides with you. So Jambo is it's hello in Swahili, and as Leslie mentioned, I used to live in Africa. I started school in West Africa, and I finished school in Kenya, and I was really lucky because I had an opportunity to go to the Masai Mara, and this little trio of Masai giraffe that's welcoming you this morning is a picture I took when I was on that trip to the Mara. Yeah, it was something that I will treasure forever. And I always I like, fun facts. I love the scientific name. And for the giraffe aficionados out there that are with the Giraffe Club, you probably already know, but Camelopardalis, it always reminds me of supercalifragilistic. It's a mouthful. But the fact that the early Europeans saw this amazing creature and thought, well, it looks like it's got the body of a camel and the spots of a leopard. So this is where the scientific name comes from. And then the other fun fact I always love is that Anne Dagg named her trusty little car Camelo, the one that she drove in South Africa. So I always think that's cool. All right, we're just moving to the next slide here. So just to get us into the mood a little more, these are a few more pictures from my trip to the Mara and some of the animals that would be sharing the savanna and woodland ecosystems with the giraffe. We've got the iconic acacia trees, and of course the zebra and the lion, the cheetah and the hartebeest. So these are just a few of the shots I wanted to share with you so we can get into the mood this morning. Okay, I know you want to get drawing. We're going to get drawing. And here's just a quick overview of what we're going to do today's class. We're going to do a giraffe portrait. And in the process, we're going to cover all the drawing basics. So lines, shapes, values, and textures. And our lines are our storytellers, and the shapes are the things, it's the scaffolding of our subject. The values are the lights and the darks that we see, and then textures, and which is the values and the line work, and it'll just pull it all together. So these are the things we're going to do today. Okay, let's get into it. So we're going to start with our lines and a warm-up exercise. It's really good to warm up when you're drawing. And if you had a chance to do the class with me, I've done this before when I was working with the Bateman Foundation, you know how keen I am on the humble HB pencil, because with a single pencil, we can get so much when we learn to play with it. And that's what we're going to start with this morning. Okay, so I'll just do the mini for now. When we get into the detailed work, I'll show you something closer, but I wanted to keep the big image on the screen so you can still see the warm-up page on
Yes.
your, great, okay. So the cool thing about the humble there we are, HB pencil, is it's right in the middle of the pack. And I've got one of these pencil sets here, which has got, it goes all the way from 9B to 9H. And so HB is just happily in the middle. And it's a good way to remember is that H stands for hard and B stands for black. And pencils are made out of graphite. So what they do is they add clay, and that's what makes the pencil harder. So the 9H has got the most clay in it, and the 9B has got the least, and it's super soft. So you can see on the slide, I've just got a little kind of primer there with different pencil strokes. So we're going to take a few minutes now, and I want you to play with your pencil. And playing with your pencil will include the angle. So if I draw a line, you can get these nice fine lines just straight up and down. And of course, if you increase the pressure, you get a nice dark line. So that's the thing when you're playing with the lines. And then if you turn it on its side, change the angle of the pencil, you get this nice broad. This always reminds me of our Douglas fir trees. You could make great bark. So just loosen up your drawing wrist, your drawing arm. We'll get our brains engaged here. And let's just play and do some line work. And I'll just keep kind of talking in the background here as you work on your things. One of the cool techniques is lines that are on a diagonal and side by side, and this is called hatching. And sometimes you can see entire pictures that are done with hatching. If you do the lines the other way, it's called cross hatching. And you can vary the look by the pressure of your pencil, the closeness of the lines. If you put cross hatches really close together, you get a dark effect. And you'll see how handy this is when it comes to the texture portion of our drawing today. These are all the little techniques. And then another fun one a lot of people love is stippling, which is just dots, which you can imagine could be for all kinds of texture, sand, insect holes, rocks, all sorts of things. At one point in my career, I was doing entire pictures with ink dots, like pointillism. You can do dots and dashes, great wiggly lines. And just if you, I'm going to change the pressure on my line. Make it fat, make it thin. And then, of course, the all-important shading. You can see in the little boxes down on the bottom there. And shading, people come to do it their own way, whatever works best for them. Often it's an even layering of graphite on paper. And if you have played with drawing and paper a lot, you know that some paper has tooth. Who knew that paper had teeth? But paper has tooth, and that allows you to pick up, or rather, the tooth picks up the graphite differently, and you get a different effect. So you come to it, you get a nice even layer of graphite. And of course, the more you layer on, the darker it gets. Even with an HB pencil, by adding pressure, we can get the darkest dark, which will be really important when we come to the shadows, or sorry, rather the values section that we're going to look at in our drawing. So you can also see on the screen, I mentioned having, I'll just tell you my favorites are just a white vinyl eraser. And that other funny one down below is a kneaded eraser. And that's kind of cool. If you've seen them, you can stretch them like silly putty. And they're good for lifting graphite up. And then I've got this other little one that I've got this recently. This is quite handy. You push it at the bottom and a little eraser head comes out, and it allows you to pull out small amounts. And then my on the side there, you can see it's called a torchon or a blending stump. It's just for blending the graphite. But another really simple way is to take a piece of tissue or a paper towel, and I don't recommend fingers, although they work, but you get pretty messy. And you essentially you move the graphite. You're sort of smoothing the graphite and moving it around. And quite often that is nice when you're working on fur, lots of natural elements. And then the other fun thing, which you can see on the side there, is drawing with your eraser. So then once you've got your shaded area, you pull out the graphite with your eraser. And that you'll see how handy this is going to be for our texture when we get to the when we pull it all together at the end. Okay, so before this is just a quick review of the basic shapes. And the reason it's so important is that if you can break your subject down into the basic shapes, you can draw just about anything. And I often ask people, what do you find hard to draw? A lot of people say faces. I often trot out hands and feet because there's so many different little portions. But if you can break the subject down into your circles, your squares, your triangles, rectangles, ovals, diamonds, you can, and then of course once you've broken it down, you get them into the right place, which we're going to do next, and then in proportion, and you've got the scaffolding. It's like a building. You've got the scaffolding for your subject. And that the little shot on the left, that baby, there's a baby giraffe with its mother. That was one from the Mara as well. And then another important point, just going back to the shapes, is you can see if we add shading, you can go from a basic shape into a form. So a circle can become a sphere by adding shading. The square becomes a cube, cone from a triangle, and so on, the cylinder and the box. So that's a kind of cool thing. And again, we'll see more. So now we're going to have a look. I think this is the first. Here we are, our very handsome subject for today, this lovely giraffe. And I just want you to take a moment here and have a look at the giraffe photo and think about the different shapes that you can see inside. He's got, it's really such a striking head shape, very strong, triangular shape in the head and the ears and the ossicones and that lovely round muzzle. And of course the eyes, you can see the little ovals there. And that wonderful nostrils, the ovals there. Okay, so just with that in mind, I just wanted you to have a chance to kind of really look at the photo and think about the shapes that you see inside. All right, so here is our drawing for today. And some of you have the template, which, and don't worry if you don't have it. I'm going to quickly show you a technique. I was saying if you don't have the template, here's a quick trick for you. If you fold a piece of paper lengthwise and just have a quick fold like that, and then you fold it crosswise like this. Teachers call it hot dog fold and hamburger fold. There we go. Then you've automatically got a reference line in the center of your page. And it's the reference lines that will really help us place our shapes. So the first thing we're going to do with our shapes, we're going to build the scaffolding of our subject. I've got a template here as well. And apologies, I think it's a mirror image for you guys. So I think the first thing that's really handy to do is to, oh, and other hot tip, work very lightly. When we start with the drawing, work lightly. You know what it's like. If you go really, really hard, you can go right through the paper. And if your lines are too dark, you've got to erase them afterwards. So in this building of shapes and scaffolding, we're going to keep our wrists nice and loose and we're going to do very light lines and light shapes. So I'm going to start by putting the reference lines down very lightly on my page here. So I'm just going to draw a line across and a line down the center. And it doesn't matter if it's perfect, don't worry. This is just a reference line to help you place your shapes. And then the other lines that are really useful, and this is where you can use your pencil like a guide, is if you've got the template, you can sort of position where the top of the ossicones are, the top there, and just put a very light line there so you know that's the top of the very top. And then the other important line you can see here is just at the base of the ears. I'm going to put a very light line in there. And the other one I think that's really important for us is the bottom of the muzzle. Just a light reference line. How's that, Leslie? Is it okay? I know people can't see the lines because they're so light. So now that I've got these light reference lines down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the large oval that makes up the giraffe's head. And what's important to look at is that it's not right in the middle. You know, we've got the lines showing the middle of the page. You can see there's about a quarter of his face on the one side and about 3/4 on the other side. So we know this is the bottom. The large oval goes to the bottom here where we've got our reference line. And it's I call it like it's an observation game. Do you know the game? Always really liked Spot the Difference. Yeah, those where you had two photos and you spot the difference. So this is really training our ability to observe shapes and placement, and it's a good exercise. So when you look at this side of the oval, you can see where it meets the midline and where it meets the top line. So just very lightly. And the thing about doing it lightly is you can go over it lots of times. Very lightly, draw that oval. Oh, did I do the top? You know what? I don't know if I did the top of the oval. That's a very important line to have in there. We want to know where the top of the head, it's right there underneath. Sorry, I didn't do that first. So I'm just putting my large oval in very lightly. And the next thing I'm going to do, and you know what? You've got these shapes in front of you, so you can put them in as you wish. I think I'm going to work on the muzzle next on mine. And that's just really, and I'm trying to keep it nice and loose, loose and light, because you'll see that afterwards you go back and darken the lines. And do that eyeball check as you go, spot the differences, and just adjust things accordingly. You can think, oh no, it's not there, it's much higher, or it's much lower, and you just change it. I'm gonna put, let's see. And then what a cool part of the giraffe are the ossicones. I was listening to Professor Fred, and it's just so interesting the more we learn about giraffe that, you know, they're not antlers, they're bones, they've got skin and all sorts of, they've got capillaries and things all around them. Again, for the aficionados in the group, I bet you probably know all sorts of stuff about the giraffe and the ossicones. But okay. I'm going to put in this nice, strong triangular shape too, because a lot of the rest of the picture, if you haven't already started it, is, you know, based around that. So I'm going to get that in. I'm putting in these lovely round, the ears are such a cool shape too. Um, and you can see how loosely I'm sort of sketching these shapes in. Let's see the top. You may have seen, in cartoons and stuff where they use the pencil. You can use your pencil as a measuring. So that's one of the things I was doing with the little reference lines, but you can also use it um, to measure shapes, lengths. And this is not an uncomplicated, there are a lot of shapes in this portrait, I will say from the outset, but they're so geometrical that I thought this would make a fun drawing exercise. All right. Getting the eyes in. And then their amazing necks. And so again, it's looking at the angle of the lines and how they meet, where they meet the rest of your drawing, where they pass through the midline of the drawing. And then sitting back and doing the comparison thinking, and I'm thinking, okay, no, that oval for the face is actually a much rounder right there, and just gently adjusting. And not worrying if it's perfect. That's an important thing. One of my favorite kinds of drawing is gesture sketching. It's really, really quick, and it captures, with lines, it captures movement and energy, and it forces you to observe. And some of the skills that, when we're looking back and forth and looking back, it's something if you take a sketchbook into nature, it's really a great way to develop your observation skills because you start looking for the shapes and the lines and the darks and the lights in something, and you start to see things differently. If you've got your scaffolding down, you've got your basic shapes, the next important step for us is to refine the lines. And then, so that process, you're looking at the portrait, the photograph, and you're saying, okay, we've got the basic shapes. But if you look at the ossicones, there's this wonderful little dip between, it's really a cool shape between the two ossicones. So you can start adjusting your picture by adding in very lightly, the shapes that make up. This is the refining part of your drawing. You've got your scaffolding, and now we're going to refine. Put in some of the nice, it's not a straight triangle from the ossicone. It's got that lovely curve that meets the top of the bulge on his eye, that very distinctive bulge eyebrow above.
I love those eyelashes too.
Aren't they? Oh gosh, eyelashes to die for.
Yes.
Yeah, they really are incredibly handsome creatures.
Yes.
And I love this. Once you get the dip here by the ear, they look like a pair of wings. There's a really distinctive curve by the head, and then a straight angle out and that lovely rounded bottom edge of the ear where it comes into the head.
And Mary, when Anne was in Africa in 1956 and she was observing giraffe, I think she had a few names for some of the giraffes based on their spot pattern.
Yes, she did. One of them was Pom Pom, because she saw a
Yeah.
spot that looked like pom pom that you might see on the top of a hat. Another was Star. So, somewhere down the body of the giraffe, she saw a shape that kind of looked like a star. So, each day when she would go out into the field and study these giraffes, she would look for these markers and then know, okay, I'm looking at pom pom, I'm looking at star. So, it would help her kind of identify the individuals.
It's amazing, isn't it, Mary, when you think, I mean, I like, again, I like to call it the AI for good, that now you can get the patterns that just that are like a thumbprint and they are, I mean, the work your mom did, it was so, that would have been so much work and a different kind of skill, that observation of being able to recognize from the patterns of the giraffe. But now, of course, they can digitize them all and tell which giraffe is which from their distinctive marking.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Every giraffe has its own unique coat pattern, just like human beings, as you say, with their fingertips,
Which is
their
just,
fingerprints.
yeah, so
And there is actually a couple of researchers who are working in Tanzania, and they have, I think at the latest count was 5,000 different giraffes. So
wow.
they drive out into the various parks in Tanzania in the wild areas. When they see a giraffe, they wait for it to turn on its right side and then they
Okay.
take a picture. They want to make sure, because of course the giraffes are going to look different on the other side. So they always have to make sure all the giraffes are standing the same way so they don't double count the giraffes. And then they
Yeah,
take a picture and they load it into their software. So they have over 5,000 individuals that they've identified just
that's
based on their
wonderful.
pattern. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah. A quick observation here, and not that I was trying to make this really harder for you, but you can see that while the face is almost face on, the neck is it's slightly turned, which is why on the right hand side of the giraffe's face, you can see a little bit more of his jaw. And so when you're doing your refining lines, pay attention to the jawline on the left, which is a little narrower than the jawline on the right side. So what I like to do is I go from the eye on the right and I drop it down and see where it joins. There's quite a curve where it joins the muzzle, and we can see quite distinctly the skeleton, the skeleton beneath the jawline there. That's the other cool thing. I mean, a lot of artists, we look at skeletons too to see what the structure is underneath because that helps with your drawing. I love those nostrils. I feel like if we could pet that nose there, it would be so, it just looks like velvet. And they're such a distinctive shape, aren't they? We started with an oval, but actually, if you look at the nostrils, it's kind of like, I was trying to think of a good comparison, a bit like an almond coming down. And again, just try and keep the lines light at this point because inevitably you'll think, nah, that's a little bit too far to the right. That's a little bit, you adjust it as you go. And that's when you're thinking if you could pet the like petting the muzzle of a horse, imagining what the pelage, which is the skin and the fur of the giraffe, what it would feel like. And I'm thinking the head is probably quite smooth, but if you look at the mane, it looks like a very coarse, quite a coarse hair in there, and that's something that informs will inform our texture when we get to it. Okay.
How long did you live in Africa for, Sue?
I was there. I was actually as a child. When I started school. We were there for 2 years in Nigeria, just before the war broke out in Nigeria, and then we moved to Jamaica to finish off that contract. It was a 5-year contract, but two in Nigeria, and then we spent 4 years in Kenya. And I have to say, some of the happiest because I started out in biology, zoology. I've got a very mixed bag of tricks, and just being able to see the wildlife. We, as a family, we had the annual passes to all the parks, and you could just go, on the weekend and see the animals. And Nairobi Game Park was so close. And I had an amazing I was, yeah, a very, very interesting time in my life. I had a wonderful biology teacher who thought it was best for us to study alpine flora and fauna on Mount Kenya. So we climbed Mount Kenya in grade 12. We didn't have, we had equipment from the local market. We didn't have any fancy equipment up to 17,000 feet. I
Oh,
just saw a picture recently, and I don't know if you know what a kanga is, but it's a cotton. I didn't have a toque. I had a Kenyan cotton wrap that I had around my head to stay warm up on the top of the mountain. But yeah, it was a pretty special experience, being able to do that.
I'm just remembering, is that your parents were teachers? Is that correct?
Yes. Well, actually, my mom was a nurse and my dad was a teacher. And
Okay.
we like to say he got a lot of mileage out of his teaching degree. He
Yeah,
taught industrial arts. So he ended up in polytechnics, often teaching students how to be teachers in industrial arts. So
I see. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What an opportunity though as a kid growing up like that. Like, oh,
When you consider that you don't actually have any control over it, looking back, I cannot deny that it was an interesting childhood. Yeah, yeah,
must have
yeah.
been hard to adapt when you came back to Canada.
Interesting you would mention because I think, yeah, people, uh, you forget. I mean, you're from here, but your references are so different that it does take a little while to feel like you belong, and figure out how you belong. And I think that's probably true for even people moving within Canada, when you go from one community to another. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. There are books written about third culture kids. It is a phenomenon
Third
that
culture. Oh, interesting.
third
Okay.
culture kids, yeah, kids that grew up, with, and of course, my parents were both from Vancouver Island, so there was that underpinning. But you get people that meet and marry overseas. The kids have parents from two different countries, and then they maybe have never been to the either country of their parents' origins, so it can be quite interesting. Well, citizens of the world is what I like to say.
Yes. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So just a few other things to get lightly in place. You may have noticed I've just put the mane on the sides. I've just got a light line for the mane, and there's a distinctive shadow underneath the neck, the muzzle. And I'm just lightly putting in something like that because you'll see when we go to the next, and we could stay here for a long time refining this, but I'd like to talk to you now about, because it's really important. I'll just move to the next slide. There. So these are values. So values are being able to see the light and the dark in your subject. And being able to see that, you may have had the experience where you draw and you draw and you're really happy with your drawing. You think, wow, what a good drawing. And then you think, but there's something, it's flat, it's missing something. And it's because you haven't really worked the pencil and laid down the darkest darks in your subject and the lightest lights, because that's what gives your subject dimension and brings it, it was like turning the circle into a sphere. That's what gives it form. So that's where the darks and the light are really important. Time-wise today, where are we at, Leslie, in terms of time?
Sorry, I was muted.
No,
It's
sorry.
11:48.
11:48. So we have just over 20 minutes, right? So what I'll do, I just will point out to you, this is a little exercise. We don't need to do it now because I think you want to spend the time on your portrait. But this is to show, if everybody can see the value bar, that the lightest light is the paper. And when we're drawing, we often use the paper to show our white. And then this is a graduation. So you go from the lightest light to the darkest dark. And we can get this gradation with the HB pencil. And at some point, if you want to try this exercise at home, it's just making a rectangle, dividing it into 5, and doing a little graduation like that. So in your picture, you should have at least 3 or 4 of this range. That's what really makes a subject come to life. I'll move to the next slide. So back to our handsome subject here. Now I want you to really, and you may be ahead of me on this, but for the when we're thinking about the values, let's look at the giraffe portrait and really see where the darkest darks are, because it's always fun to pull them up first. And I can see, the tips of the ossicones, super dark. That inner, there's a really lovely dark patch inside the ears. And then, of course, the eyes are wonderfully dark. So that is where you really are going to need to work your pencil and bring out the darkest dark. I don't suggest going hard. I suggest layers of graphite until you get it. And it takes time. We're actually doing quite a lot in a short period. I have spent a week on a graphite picture. It can take a lot of time, to bring it, but by the end of an hour, you'll have something that you've got it fairly far along. Those nostrils, you see that, look at, they're about 1, 2, I see 4 gradations of light just in the nostrils. The darkest dark where the hole is, the little light beside it, the color of the pelage beside that, and then all the wonderful markings on the neck. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to start laying down the shading. And it's a look at the picture, a look at your picture, a look at the picture, a look at your picture, until we get that lovely dark ossicone. And that really cool dark patch inside. And this is an example. The dark patch inside the ear is a cool example of how you can draw with your eraser. So if I lay down the shape, I'll just do it on the one side here. I'm going to lay down that dark shape inside the ear. Mary, have you been back to Africa fairly recently, or?
Yes. Well, I was back there last year,
Okay, yeah.
into South Africa.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. We did a wonderful number of days working with another organization called Wild Tomorrow, where they take farmland and which is a lot of it's for growing pineapples, and then
Okay.
they purchased land and rewild it and then introduced animals. So they've got a conservation center that they've graciously agreed to name after my mom. So it's going
Oh,
to be the
wow.
and
How
in a
lovely.
stag conservation center. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we're going back. I'm taking 2 trips with me. We've got a number of guests that are going to be going back on 2 different tours. So yeah, I'm going to be leaving in July and spend some time in July and August.
Wow. Oh,
It's going to
that's
be
wonderful.
fantastic. Yeah.
I'm just gonna, with the dark in the ear here, I'm just gonna take my little tissue, which I've kind of rolled into, let's see, gotta find my hand, into my own little torchon or smudge stick, and I'm just gonna smooth out. And then after you smooth, sometimes you can put another layer on to darken it up. These are just little techniques. So it's not something, with our first lay down here, these are things you can go back in afterwards and play with. But then what I wanted to show you, you see those lovely little white hairs coming off of the giraffe's ear? I can use my larger eraser. I've cut the edges off it so that it's sharp. That's the nice thing about these vinyl erasers. And then you can draw the hair out, create the effect of hair by drawing with your eraser. The other way would have been to have left it white from the start and gone around it, but this is kind of gives you I find with the eraser pulling it out of the dark, it's a smoother, more natural effect. Nothing, and the other thing that's really nice is to get your eyes in, because once you've got the eyes, your subject, you really feel like your subject is coming to life.
They're so dark, those eyes.
Aren't they? Yes. Liquid pools of probably, yeah, just like, and so that again is just an effective way when you're only working with an HB. I can show you, see if I cheat and I use my 9B, that's almost like charcoal. So if you do have, if you enjoy drawing with graphite, I do recommend you don't need a set with 9, you can get a set, a smaller set. But if you have a range, see, I don't know if you can see now, but I'm going in with a 9B, and with the same pressure, I instantly get a really black there. So that would be, if you want to develop your drawing more, having a range of pencils allows you to do this um, more easily. But again, with the HB, you can just get a remarkable range just by layering, pressure, angle. And look, the little eyelashes coming down. That takes me, I'm going to go to the next slide because as this is sort of pulling it all together, um, my next slide is I've got this lovely picture of a young giraffe by Robert Bateman, and who has a very special relationship with Anne Dagg as well. And it was really wonderful to see Mary and Anne in Victoria for the screening of The Woman Who Loves Giraffe. And then over the years, I think Robert Bateman did a couple of paintings of giraffe, didn't he, Mary? That your
He did.
mom,
He did.
yeah,
Yeah. He gave
yeah.
a
So
couple of paintings to my mother. Yeah.
yeah, a beautiful one that I thought was really there was one that was very cool. It was more abstract than his normal his
Yes.
his very highly realistic work. But
Yes.
the reason I included this one of his is you can see, particularly with the mane, how by putting the dark behind the mane and pulling he probably pulled out the light with an eraser as well, or he left the paper white and just did the dark. But with the dark contrast at the back of the mane, you see the sunlight on the mane there. I thought that was rather cool. And then I've got some samples. We've got a Rothschild's giraffe, a Maasai giraffe, a reticulated giraffe. And if you look at the photos, you can see the texture. And I think the important thing for that with your drawings, when you're really fine tuning and pulling it all together, is the angle of the texture. So if you look at the upper patch, you can see that those are fine little lines. And that's, again, if you have a set of pencils, your harder pencils in the H range allow you to add texture like that. A sharp HB, you can do it too. but you'll get a bigger range if you've got a few more pencils. So now we've got our, we started with our lines, and then we moved to the shapes to build the scaffolding of our portrait. And then we looked at values, so that's the dark and the light, and then the texture. So I've just put the image back up again so that now you can start pulling everything together. You can see the really distinct patterns on the muzzle, and if you look, you can see that the texture is the little lines are going, they're kind of radiating out. So that's the kind of thing that you can incorporate into your drawing when you fine tune it. It's nice. I mean, and I was sort of jumping here with the values to get, and because we have limited time, but with the values to get a basic layer of color down. So, I had started with the darkest dark, but of course, then we've got our ossicones. We need to have the different shade of brown in our graphite. And then there's that wonderful, you can really see the shape of the giraffe skull where it curves. And using shading, we create that form and that dimension. Yeah, so I had done it like a series. So, starting, I don't know if people can see that okay, but just the shapes. And then the next phase where you refine. So you start with the shapes, you go to your refining lines, and then, this is cheating because I did this one before. So don't feel like I got this done as quickly as this because it does take time. And I could even go over this one again and again and bring out the darks, bring out the lights, play more with each other. But we have a giraffe. We have an image of a giraffe, and it shows the different range because there's at least, I think the thing to remember is to get at least 3 or 4 um, depths of color out of your little HB.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful, Sue.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think I mentioned to you, Leslie, that my oldest friend, I've known her since she's 15. She's Kenyan. She emigrated eventually to California, so she's next, she's not far away from me now. But we've known each other for well, over 50 years, I guess. And um, her favorite animal is the giraffe as well. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Just
nice.
a quick question
Yes.
for the actual neck part. I've drawn in
Yes.
the spots. Should I
Oh,
do
yes.
anything with the area that's not spots?
If you look, I'll bring that back up, Mary. Good question. That the if you look, yes, I mean, because that's where you could use stippling. And if you look at the angle, it would be very light. Um, but And this is me trying to bring my, I'm trying to bring the slide back up. Do you have the slide on the screen still with the picture, the portrait?
Yes.
The portrait, yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. So in the neck, and this is where, time, on this one, I started just doing very, very light with a very loose wrist to give the impression of between the darker spots, there is the pelage, right? That's got the skin and the fur that also has texture.
Right.
And I did mean to mention those lovely little whiskers coming out of the bottom of his muzzle. Very cool. But yes, and you could do that different ways. And you like even stippling could give you a nice little texture to the skin there. That's where you can pull in, we talked about cross-hatching and stuff, and I mentioned some people do entire pictures in cross-hatching. I think I use cross-hatching on these patches, just back and forth, back and forth. Or you can lay down shading and then smooth it and do some cross-hatching. But you're just sort of building it up. And that mane would take, it takes a lot of work because there's a thickness that you need to develop with the mane, and that's just you could lay down a light color with your pencil on the side like this. That would save you some work. And then go over it with the loose drawing. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Any
so
other
much,
drawing? Do
Sue.
we have second? You're most welcome. This was a very lovely way for me to start my day.
Well, and us too. It's so relaxing. I find that drawing is always relaxing, and
Yes.
to draw such an interesting animal like the giraffe. And we just really appreciate the time that you've taken with us today to do this.
Oh,
Uh,
my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. And there's the template if other people got, if they want to try the whole giraffe, it's all the same, walk through the same things, our shapes, our lines, our values. Yeah.
it's been a real reminder to me too how helpful those shapes are
Yes. And
and
then
those
taking the
guidelines.
time, yeah, taking the time to um really look, really observe. We do have to develop our observation skills to get the right shapes and the right proportions and the right positioning and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
And I just hope that for those who are doing this giraffe drawing session right now, but also those who end up doing it through the recording in a different time zone, that you share your drawings with us. We'd love to see them.
Oh, and if you could then share them with me, I would love to see. Yeah, yeah. And also remember that I've been drawing for a long time too, so depending on where you are on this journey, it takes time and practice. And I'm sure some of you are also already very good, but it just takes time and a real practice, drawing, drawing techniques, drawing basics.